We've been discussing prophecy. Every prophet who prophesizes, he first sees a riddle, or he has a dream. The Talmud tells us that 1/60th of every dream is prophecy. 1/60th. What does this mean? So the Talmud tells over a story. Shmuel was one of the great rabbis of the Talmud. He had a relationship with the Persian emperor. And Persian emperor, because the Persians, they ruled Babylon. And Shmuel was a doctor, besides being one of the leading Torah sages of his generation who lived in Babylon. And he says to Shmuel, he says to him, I see how brilliant you are, how smart, and how smart you are. I want to see, could you tell me what I'm going to dream tonight? That's what the Persian emperor says to Shmuel. So Shmuel says, look, I think I can. What I'm going to dream tonight, and tomorrow you'll tell me what I dreamt. So he goes and he describes certain scenes which are literally horrifying. Meaning that once the person puts this in your mind, you can't put it out of your mind. And as a result of that, you can think about it all day. And he starts describing certain scenarios, and he leaves it at that. So the king says, tomorrow, the emperor says, tomorrow we'll meet. You'll tell me what I dreamt. No problem. Next day, she says to the rabbi, so what did I dream? She starts telling what he dreamt. So the Gemara asks, the Talmud asks, how did he know? How did he know what he was going to dream? Because a person usually dreams what he thinks about all day. Things that you think about, that's what you dream about. So because he put in his mind these horrifying, fearful types of scenarios, which actually rattled him, therefore his mind was consumed with this. Therefore, what he dreamt was a semblance of what he actually implanted in his mind. Talmud says that kind of dream has no relevance to a 60th prophecy. Because the only reason why the person dreamt that is because it's something he thought about all day. The person has certain aspirations to become wealthy, to become famous. So everything is touched and intermingled with that aspiration or fantasy that you can be whatever you think you're going to be. As a result of that, we think about things which have semblance to that. And therefore, the Talmud says, most dreams are nonsense, a foolishness. However, when you have a dream, which is a 60th of prophecy, that kind of dream, you dream about something that you never thought about. And all of a sudden, something so unusual is put in your mind. For instance, a person dreams about an esrog, a citron fruit. How does that all of a sudden come into your mind? It's not something you thought about since last year, Sukkot, when you had the esrog, you had the citron. That you dream about that, it has a certain degree of significance. What it means, that's a different discussion. How to interpret what that word means. Why you pictured in your dream, whatever that may be. Separate. But that's what we're talking about. Something that you didn't think about, something somehow it came in your mind, that is 1/60th of prophecy. What does that mean? What does that mean? The Talmud tells us that until the end of the first temple period, until the very beginning of the second temple period, there was prophecy. There were 3 prophets, which were the last prophets. The name was Chagi, Zechariah, and Malachi. They were the last prophets. And they passed away at the beginning of the second temple period. After that, there's no longer prophecy. However, although there was no longer prophecy, there's what we call baskol. What's a baskol? A heavenly voice would call out from heaven, and God would communicate, but not everybody was privy to this heavenly voice. And you would hear this heavenly voice, and it would say certain things. And God was calling out to those who were privy to hear this. It's much less than prophecy, as we'll discuss in a moment. When the era of Baskol, the heavenly voice ceased, then there's what we call divine inspiration. Meaning God plants in a person's a level of understanding, which the person understands. It's nothing to do with he thought about or understood, it was just planted in his brain. Person has a question in his mind, and he has a solution immediately, and he's convinced it is it. That's the solution. And he can't be discouraged that that's not the solution. There was no way he had the background to figure it out, how to even deal with the issue. It's clear, and we're talking about a person of special dimension, of holiness. God put that in his mind, and he knows exactly, he has a directive from God. That's called Ruach HaKodesh, divinely inspired. But Bas Kol was the heavenly voice. But when there was prophecy, as I mentioned, the Ramchal writes, based on the Rambam, that when the prophet starts prophesying, he immediately starts trembling, and he falls into a faint, similar to like an epileptic fit. Why? Because when God connects to that person's soul, it's a level of intensity that the body being finite and the body being physical, it cannot tolerate that infusion of connection of direct spirituality. As a result of that, the person starts trembling to the point where the person goes into a dead faint. When the person is in the sleep state, where God is communicating with his soul, has nothing to do with the faculties of the person. He sees a vision. The vision he sees, whatever God wants to show him the vision. It's a riddle. And God doesn't expect him to figure out the riddle. Immediately, God gives him a deciphering of what he sees. He may see things in the background which are blurred. Certain things in that picture he sees are more vivid and clear. Whether it's the colors is faint or more clear, whether it's the individuals there, whether it's children, adults, warriors, whoever they may be, sheep, how many sheep, flocks, herds, vegetation, trees, all the various things he sees in this vision have some level of significance, has significance. What is it? Until he gets the deciphering, he has no idea. God immediately gives him a deciphering of everything that he sees, that he's shown in this vision. God doesn't leave it up to him to interpret. Why? Because it's very simple. What is it significant? We could guess, and we could theorize, and we could many things speculate. But what exactly is God saying? When God communicates with a prophet, he's very specific, precise, to the nth degree, that there's no question in the prophet's mind what exactly God is communicating to him and what the message is. So therefore, the deciphering of that vision, of that riddle, is God's deciphering. What is the value? What is the value of God giving that vision and giving him an understanding of the significance of the flocks, the people, the environment, what it's all about? And not many things. Once he has that deciphering God, he understands that everything in life, everything in existence, is a representation of something else. Very symbolisms. An event happens, an earthquake. You see a waterfall. You see lightning. Whatever you see, everything has a significance, and it's happening for a reason. Once the prophet becomes conditioned, it doesn't take very long. Through this communication, he's already has an understanding of physical existence. When he sees things, when he hears about things, he knows exactly how to interpret and how to decipher world events. Because God already gave him the inner scoop, the understanding of what all these things represent, especially in combination. That's number one. And he has an understanding to the depth of what that represents. The breadth and depth of what that is. I'll give you an example. We find in the beginning of creation, there was no more intelligent person than Adam, who was created by God. His level of intelligence and spirituality was one of a kind. He was created, he was the handiwork of God, nearly perfect. The Torah tells us that God passed before him every species of living creature. Birds, reptiles, insects, domesticated, undomesticated, and he gave each one a name. Each bird. What does that mean? He just came up with a name and tagged it. This is a pigeon. This is an eagle. This is a sparrow. This is a falcon. Is that what he did? Just by coming up with a name and identifying, tagging it. So Chaim Volozhin explains, this is based on Kabbalistic understanding, the Zohar. Adam had such a deep and broad understanding of existence. When he saw the eagle, in Hebrew, the word for eagle is nesher, nun shin resh, nesher. If you understand what that word means, what lies in that word, Adam understood every aspect of the eagle's physical structure, its ability, its power, its form, within the spiritual context of existence. Everything is a piece of the puzzle, why it's necessary for existence to have the eagle. Based on understanding its physicality and it's relevant to the spiritual infrastructure of the world, he named it Nesher. So if you understood what the word Nesher means, what lies in that word, you'll understand every aspect of that eagle. Its makeup, its ability, and its reason why it exists versus the totality of existence. He named the lion Ari. Ari is a lion, or Aryeh. Same idea. The lion, the Talmud says, is the king of the jungle. Of all the undomesticated species, it's the king of the jungle. Its power, its form, has broader shoulders, narrow hips, all this. Its physical structure, its muscular, everything. Adam called it Ari. Within the word Ari or Aryeh lies every understanding of the lion in terms of its makeup and why it is the way it is. When the prophet is communicated by God and he sees depictions of whatever he sees, and God gives him a deciphering, he understands what that is a representation in existence. And not only that, he gives him the ability to understand all the ramifications of what he sees. You know, we say, Ezel Chacham Arasa Nolad. Who's a wise man? The one who sees the consequence, the ramifications of what's going to be in the future. You know, a person who's an exceptional genius, very often, he sees something now, and he's 20 steps beyond what he sees, because he understands how this evolves and what it will manifest itself into. The person has a phenomenal business mind, and he's offered an opportunity. The moment he has the opportunity, he's putting up the skyscraper and having it fully occupied, and what kind of office they can have there. He's already beyond. And he's already financing the building that he didn't buy yet. You know, that's kind of mind he has. The prophet, because God gives him this insight, understanding, which is on an absolute level, it's not only when he understands now, he can understand things that can be in 1,000 years from now. Of course, this is a divine insight directly connected to a soul to be able to direct people, to advise people, to head off problems into the future, because he understands how everything evolves due to the communication with God. And that's the value. It's not forecast future. It's to give the prophet the most profound understanding of the essence of everything which God shows him. And its value is now he understands ramifications, representations, to be able to be an asset to existence, to advise people, or even himself how to do his personal growth, to be able to deal with many things. We find that Yaakov which is the most special patriarch, right before he passed away, he wanted to reveal when Mashiach was going to come. And God denied him the right to do that to his children. He did not share it with his children, but he wanted to. And that's the reason why the last closing portion of the book of Bereshit is called Pasha Stuma. It's a sealed portion. God sealed it from him. He shut him down that he couldn't share that information. If God shares it with that individual, the person knows. If God does not, the person has no right to share it with someone else. Yaakov thought that his children were worthy to know this. God, by blanking it out from his mind at that moment, that indicated, confirmed he can't share it with his children, which he did not. But there's another midrash, very interesting midrash. Yaakov was going to share when Mashiach would come. And at first, he thought, because they were so special, they're referred to by King David in Psalms as Shiftei Koh, the tribes of God. They're holy people, so they should be privy to when Mashiach will come. Then he hesitated. Maybe they're not worthy because they're somehow tinged with sin. And in Hebrew, the word sin is chet. Chet means sin. And because they're soiled with sin, they're not worthy. But then he realized that the letters among all his children's names, the letters ches tes, which spells chet, is not among the letters of his children's names. So indicated that what he thought maybe they have a spiritual deficiency, they don't. Because the letters ches tes is not among his children's names. This is a midrash, what I'm telling you. But then after he was about to reveal it, then he realized there were another two letters not among his children's names. Kuf Tzadi, Ketz. Ketz means the end of time. And because Kuf Tzadi is not among his children's names, that indicates to him clearly God does not want him to reveal it. So I asked the question. We're waiting now. We're nearly at the end of time. Mashiach still hasn't come. Yaakov and his children lived how many thousands of years ago? 3,600 years ago. 3,800 years ago. He still hasn't come. If he would have revealed it then, what difference would it have made? Still hasn't come. He would say, the year 2023, Rosh Chodesh Elul, Mashiach is coming. And if they would have known, they wouldn't have known what difference to make. They wouldn't have shared with anyone unless God would allow them. But God says, no, it's not for them to know. Why? So the way I understood it was this. You know, the first verse you teach a child when he begins speaking, Talmud tells us in two locations, is a pasuk, a verse in the Torah. Torah tziva lanu, Moshe, Moshe kilas Yaakov. That's the first. Those are the first words you teach your child when he begins speaking. Not mother goose, mother rhymes, mother goose rhymes, all this. Not the Mad Hatter, any of that. That's not what you teach your child. Right? You teach him Torah Tziv Mora Shakilas Yaakov. Now, in Hebrew, the word for Yerusha, for inheritance, is Yerusha. That's how you say inheritance. What is Morosha grammatically? Grammatically, it means a heritage. It is the heritage of the congregation of Jacob. The Torah was commanded us by Moshe, and that is the heritage of the congregation of Jacob. That's the meaning of those words. These are Moshe Rabbeinu's words in the closing portion of the Torah. Torah Tziv Lanu Moshe Moshe Kilas Yaakov. Okay? So Rabbeinu Bachya, who's one of the commentators on the Torah, explains grammatically what does Morosha mean? What is a heritage? Heritage means it's ours to understand and to cherish and to live by it. And we have an obligation to pass it on to the next generation. Every generation has an obligation to secure it and guarantee it should be perpetuated into the future by the next generation or even two generations. As far as we can project into the future, we have an obligation to secure it, to guarantee it will be perpetuated till then. And we have to do whatever we can to guarantee it's going to be, whether it's an educational system, whether it's setting up a fund, whatever it may be, an endowment fund, whatever it is, doesn't make a difference. That is the meaning of Morosha. We have to project into the future to guarantee the Torah should not only be now, it should be part of eternity. It should be perpetuated. That's the meaning of Morosha. So what is the obligation? If a person has sage wisdom, he sees beyond what most people see. And what he sees now, he sees a certain deficiency in, let's say, Jewish education. And he understands that if he does certain things now, Jewish education will be secure for the next 3 generations. As the Torah being Morosha, being our heritage, the grammatical structure of that word indicates you have no responsibility to make sure that the Torah is secure and will be perpetuated and secured. You have to be responsible for that. Due to your understanding of what's going to evolve, and unless you do something now, it's not going to evolve as it should evolve. That's the understanding. Yaakov felt this way. Mashiach's going to come 2023. It's okay. But if they knew when he was coming, all that's necessary until that time, we have peaks and we have valleys. There are many things that have to be done. Many things have to be put into place. Because if they're not put in place, God forbid, the Jewish people could actually, God forbid, be in a position to be compromised, to go into the oblivion. So knowing when the end of time is, to be worthy of that moment, and having that knowledge, the tribes of the sons of Yaakov, they had the foresight to be able to innovate, to guarantee that when it evolves 10, 20 generations later as it should evolve. So therefore, Yaakov wanted to share this with his children because they are the patriarchs in each of their families, and they should innovate and establish and guarantee this go into the future, knowing what the end game is. What happens if they're tinged with sin? The letters ches, tes are among the names. The moment you're tinged with sin, you have certain blind spots. You have certain conflicts of interest. You don't have the level of spiritual objectivity that you should have. And as a result of that, you're way off. What you see to be straight is going on a curve. Once you go on a curve, adhere from center to slight curve, it's not off too much. But if you keep going in that direction, you're off the cliff. Therefore, if they had ches tes in among their names, those letters, Yaakov understood they're not worthy. Because they're not they should not be the innovators for the future, because they don't have the level of clarity that's necessary to assure the future. When you realize the letters ches tes was not in the names, he figured, good, they're not tinged, they're pure. So if they're pure, definitely they're qualified to make those innovations and put in place the safety measures to guarantee the future. It should evolve the way it should evolve. But he realized something else. The letters Kuf Tzadik, which spells Ketz, end of time, was not in the letters, which means that's not the way God wants it. God wants it that based on what your endowment you have, figure it out, do your best. Do your best. To have this insider information when he's coming, to be able to make that determination, that's for God to know, or for anybody who God wants to share that with, to reel to. Otherwise, we go based on the way we understand it. The Talmud tells us that a judge who's really equitable to all the defendants, not only does he have to be proficient, a judge rules only based on what he understands. Human capacity. We're not talking about prophecy. It's not prophecy. It's based on processing information the way he understands it. God says the way you plan the future is the way you understand it. You may make mistakes, but it's okay. That's part of divine providence, that you shouldn't have 20/20 vision. You make mistakes because sometimes mistakes have to be made. You have to have setbacks. Sometimes you have to have the setback to make the advance afterwards, to appreciate that you're lacking of understanding. Only God knows. As a result of that, that's why the Ketz, when Mashiach comes, had to be kept privy. The only one who knows it is the one God shares with us, reveals it to. The prophet experienced the prophecy, the vision, the scenario, and then given the interpretation through deciphering of God, it gives the prophet to understand many things, even going 1,000 years into the future. Meaning, and God revealing it to him, this deep and broad understanding means you're chosen, you have a responsibility to head off things at the past, to guarantee secure things for 200 years from now. Because if not, God forbid, things are going to be in jeopardy. There's a famous story with the Chofetz Chaim of communism. Right after the Russian Revolution, when it was established, their objective was to eradicate every religion. There's no God. That was communism. And if you believed in anything, you were subject to either be killed or sent to Siberia. That was the purging of anything to have to do with religion, especially Judaism. That's what it was. And they built, the communists, they built up Moscow and everything else. And the Chofetz Chaim said that communism will last exactly 70 years. On the 70th anniversary, it's over. The UN Glasnost took place exactly 70 years from the time the Chofetz Chaim made that statement. 70 years, it's over. The Chofetz Chaim, through his divine understanding, understood this evil at that level, which especially Stalin intensified it. He had all his purges. He killed millions of people. It ended after 70 years. But Stalin died, they toppled his statues. When Gorbachev became the premier of the Soviet Union, it was Glasnost. They took down the Berlin Wall. When they took the Berlin Wall down, that was exactly the 70th anniversary of the Chofetz Chaim statement. 70 years, it's over. That's exactly what the prophet's all about. What do we have to do now, based on what God shared with this person and understanding how things evolve? Because of that absolute understanding, depth and breadth, what is his responsibility now versus the future? Present and future. Or deal with issues of the past which haven't been resolved. How do you resolve them to go into the future? That's what prophecy is all about. It's not forecasting the future necessarily. It could be, but it's not. It's not necessarily to rebuke and to chastise the people. It's not that. It's for him to have that understanding that he should be qualified to be essential and one of the main components to guarantee the future of the Jewish people. This is the Ramchal, how was he explained, based on the Rambam in terms of what prophecy is. So prophecy is not, he has a vision and he has to figure it out, interpret it. The interpretation is the divine interpretation. So we'll give it to him directly. No, because there's so much to be taught, to be understood. Because you can have replicas replicating this scenario, and you may see it in your lifetime. And when you see it, you know exactly what it represents and how to deal with what it means, because all that you see are all symbolisms of what the reality is. Just to conclude, the Talmud tells us that Hillel HaZoket, Hillel the elder, who was the prince of Israel, had 80 students. The greatest of his students was Rabbi Yonasan ben Uziel. He was the greatest. The smallest of the students was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, which ultimately became the leading sage of Jewish people, time of destruction of the Second Temple. So the Gemara asks, why was he considered the greatest? And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was considered from the smallest. So the Gemara goes to explain, knowledge-wise, they had identical knowledge. And it goes to, it delineates what knowledge did they have. So it says what they knew was sichas ophos. Birds have a language. They have language. When birds chirp, although there's no intelligence, they're communicating certain things about existence. This is something called sichas dekolim. When the palm trees sway in the wind and it rustles and there's sound, those sounds are communicating certain things about existence. They understood how to decipher all those sounds. The chirping of the birds, the different species of birds, and the trees, when they rustled in the wind, the palm trees, they understood exactly what messages were being communicated. It's like you have an amplifier. Amplifier is only the means. It's not the trees are talking. The trees are the means to communicate certain subtleties of existence that if you understand, you could decipher them, then you understand what's happening. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who was the least of the students, and Rabbi Yosef ben Zil was the greatest, they even that they knew. So Talmud says, so what was the difference? So I mentioned the Gemara before, Talmud. The Rabbi Yosef ben Zil would study Torah, the birds that would fly overhead would be consumed by fire. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, not. But knowledge-wise, identical. What do you have to hear what's going on? You know, it was known, the tsunami that took place in the Far East, before it took place, people were bathing, sunning on all kinds of beautiful furniture. They had no inkling what was going to happen. About an hour, 2 hours before, there was a shift. Animals, birds, they went to high ground. And there was like a tumult in the forest. The chimpanzees and the monkeys, which are there in the forest, they went to high ground. Nobody knew what was happening. And people were sunning in the sun, on the ocean, like boats, like nothing was all of a sudden, in a moment. It's like somebody pulled out the plug. And the ocean all of a sudden surges in. But none of the wildlife was affected because they already had a sense. They were able to detect in existence. There was a sense something was about to happen. The human being doesn't have that sense. Therefore, they went to high ground and everybody there, they died, they perished in the tsunami. But if you could read all those noises, those sounds, there's something being communicated. The Navi, the prophet, it's not to forecast the future. It's to understand ramifications of today for tomorrow and for maybe 100 years into the future or 1,000 years into the future. So whatever they could do to innovate it, to direct it, that's what they have to do. That's the value of prophecy.